Hello, everyone. How are we doing today? I hope we're having a lovely time. Sorry, I'm still adjusting my microphone because I had to change where I put it because it was being very awkward. So, we're doing our best, okay? We're doing our best. Okay, just trying to get it into a decent position. And then I have to get it to a decent volume because I don't want to be too loud, but I don't want to be too quiet as well. Side note, I put my tea bag on a napkin and it made a very pretty little splaying of tea color. It's very pretty maroon because I decided to have a raspberry blackberry mix of tea. I hope we're all having a good day though. I know that I'm kind of relaxing today. So, just to get everyone caught up, I know that we took a little bit of a time away from the book so I can get a little bit of a plot update. Um, so we all likely remember all of the bullshit that happened with Mr. Rochester. At least I hope we remember it. That was terrifying and traumatizing. But we found out that he's already married to someone with some issues that probably should be addressed, but you know, it's olden times and it's very unlikely anything will actually get handled. But, Jane, poor Jane, she left and she was struggling. She was dealing with, basically being homeless for a while and, eventually ended up at Mr. John's house, I believe his name is. Well, he's a saint, so that's fun. With his lovely sisters, both of whom I think are actually very much in love with with Jane. I ship it. I hope you ship it too. And she finally has recovered enough to have a full-on conversation with Mr. John. She's not telling him who she actually is. I don't actually know why she's avoiding that, but we'll figure it out. I mean, I suppose she just doesn't want Mr. Uh, Rochester to find her. Either way, she's telling Mr. John about her time with Brocklehurst in Lawwood, and we'll finish up the chapter. I believe we are on chapter. One moment. We're on chapter 29, going on chapter 30. So feel free to get nice and comfy, nice and cozy, and simply enjoy while I read this enchantingly horrifying book. I am an orphan, the daughter of a clergyman. My parents died before I could know them. I was brought up as a dependent, educated in a charitable institution. I will even tell you the name of the establishment, where I passed 6 years as a pupil and 2 as a teacher. Lawwood Orphan Asylum in Blankshire. Hello. Hi, small goth potato. How are you doing? I hope you're doing wonderful. Let's see. You will have heard of it, Mr. Rivers, the blank. The Reverend Robert Brocklehurst is treasurer. I have heard of Mr. Brocklehurst, and I have seen the school. I left Lawwood nearly a year since to become a private governess. I obtained a good situation and was happy. This place I was obliged to leave 4 days before I came here. The reason of my departure I cannot and ought not to explain. It would be useless, dangerous, and would sound incredible. No blame attached to me, as I am as free from culpability as any one of you three. Miserable I am, and must be for a time, for the catastrophe which drove me from a house I had found a paradise was of a strange and direful nature. I observed but 2 points in planning my departure: speed and secrecy. To secure these, I had to leave behind me everything I possessed except a small parcel, which, in my hurry and trouble of mind, I forgot to take out of the coach that brought me to Whitcross. To this neighborhood, then, I came, quite destitute. I slept 2 nights in the open air, and wandered about 2 days without crossing a threshold. But twice in that space of time did I taste food, and it was when brought by hunger, exhaustion, and despair almost till the last gasp that you, Mr. Rivers, is Mr. Rivers. It's like John Rivers, sorry. That you, Mr. Rivers, forbade me to perish of want at your door, and took me under the shelter of your roof. I know all your sisters have done for me since, for I have not been insensible during. Oh, thank you so much for the resub, Sumi. Let's see. Took me under the shelter of your roof. I know all your sisters have done for me since, for I have not been insensible during my seeming torpor. Not stupor, torpor. Hummingbirds do that as well, did you know? That's funny. And I owe to their spontaneous, genuine, genial compassion as large a debt as to your evangelical charity. Don't make. Yeah, I am. That's usually how I talk during these streams. It's Book Mommy. Book Mommy wants to read you nice and gently. Don't make her talk anymore, St. John, said Diana as I paused. She is evidently not yet fit for excitement. Good. I'm glad you're feeling relaxed. Come to the sofa and sit down now, Miss Elliot. She lied and said her name. Her last name is Elliot, which is silly, but whatever. She's a little liar. She just has to lie for a little bit. It's okay. I gave an involuntary half-start at hearing the alias. I had forgotten my new name. Mr. Rivers, whom nothing seemed to escape, noticed it at once. It's like, you little bitch, you lied to me. How dare you lie to me about your name? You said your name was Jane Elliot, he observed. I did say so, and it is the name by which I think it expedient to be called at present, but is not my real name, and when I hear it, it sounds strange to me. Your real name you will not give? No, I fear discovery above all things, and whatever disclosure would lead to it, I avoid. You are quite right, I am sure, said Diana. Now do, brother, let her be at peace a while. See, she's such a ride-or-die lady. I love her. She's just like, no, 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 let her have her privacy. She clearly doesn't want you to know her name, so let her have that, okay? Okay. I love Diana so much. But when St. John had mused a few moments, he recommenced the imperturbably imperturbably. Nice. I actually said it right. That's crazy. And with as much acumen as ever. You would not like to be long dependent on our hospitality. You would wish, I see, to dispense as soon as may be with my sister's compassion, and above all with my charity. I'm quite sensible of the distinction drawn, nor do I resent it. It is just. You desire to be independent of us? I do. I have already said so. Show me how to work or how to seek work. That is all I now ask. Then let me go, if it be but to the meanest cottage. I know. I actually do like a lot of very fun words. There's quite a lot of words that I don't know. I read a lot actually. And then let me go, if it be but to the meanest cottage. But till then, allow me to stay here. I dread another essay of the horrors of homeless destitution. Indeed, you shall stay here, said Diana, putting her white hand on my head. You shall, repeated Mary. I really think that these two women. I want Jane and Diana and Mary to be in a throuple so bad for some reason. They're like, oh, you're gonna stay here. Trust us. We'll make sure you're very happy and very independent. You like my little eyebrow waggles? Eh? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's their fault, okay? They're doing the implications. They're doing all of the implications, okay? Anyway. Oh boy. Repeated Mary in the tone of undemonstrative sincerity which seemed natural to her. My sisters, you see, have a pleasure in keeping you. Oh boy. This is. I'm sorry. This isn't helping. Oh my goodness. Said Mr. St. John, as they would have a pleasure in keeping and cherishing a half-frozen bird some wintry wind might have driven through their casement. I feel more inclination to put you in the way of keeping yourself, and shall endeavor to do so. But observe, my sphere is narrow. I am but the incumbent of a poor country parish. My aid must be of the humblest sort. And if you are inclined to despise the day of small things, seek some more efficient succor. It's a different word than Suckeker. It's not that one. It's Succor. Than such as I can offer. She already said that she is willing to do anything honest she can do, answered Diana for me. And you know, St. John, she has no choice of helpers. She is forced to put up with such crusty people as you. That's mean. I will be a dressmaker. I will be a plain workwoman. In my own time and way. He now resumed the book with which he had been occupied before tea. I soon withdrew, for I had talked as much, and sat up as long as boop boop. Okay, there we go. My microphone couldn't handle it. I don't know when exactly my audio cut off. When did my voice cut off? I'm guessing at the beginning of the chapter. We're on chapter 30 now, by the way. The more I knew of the inmates of Moor House, the better I liked them. In a few days I had so far recovered my health that I could sit up all day and walk out sometimes. I could join with Diana and Mary in all their occupations, converse with them as much as they wished, and aid them when and where they would allow me. There was a reviving pleasure in this intercourse, of a kind now tasted by me for the first time, the pleasure arising from perfect congeniality of tastes, sentiments, and principles. See, they're in love. I love that. I love them so much. I liked to read what they liked to read. What they enjoyed delighted me. What they approved I reverenced. They loved their sequestered home. I too, in the gray, small, antique structure, with its low roof, its latticed casements, its moldering walls, its avenue of aged firs, all grown aslant under the stress of mountain winds, its garden dark with yew and holly, and where no flowers but of the hardiest species would bloom, found a charm both potent and permanent. They clung to the purple moors behind and around their dwelling, to the hollow vale into which the pebbly bridle path leading from their gate descended, and which wound between fern banks first, and then amongst a few of the wildest little pasture fields that ever bordered a wilderness of heath, or gave sustenance to a flock of grey moorland sheep, with their little mossy-faced lambs. They clung to this scene, I say, the perfect enthusiasm of attachment. I could comprehend the feeling, and share both its strength and truth. I saw the fascination of the locality. I felt the consecration of its loneliness. My eye feasted on the outline of swell and weep. No, of swell and sweep. On the wild coloring communicated to ridge and dell by moss, by heath bell, by flower sprinkled turf, by brilliant bracken and mellow granite crag. These details were just to me what they were to them, so many pure and sweet sources of pleasure. The strong blast and the soft breeze, the rough and the halcyon day, the hours of sunrise and sunset, the moonlight and the clouded night, developed for me, in these regions, the same attraction as for them. Wound round my faculties the same spell that entranced theirs. Eh. If anything can be said about classical writing and classical authors, it's that they can really paint just the most beautiful romantic picture. Like, this place sounds amazing and beautiful. This place sounds so astonishingly just enchanting. Indoors we agreed equally well. They were both more accomplished and better read than I was, but with eagerness I followed in the path of knowledge they had trodden before me. I devoured the books as they lent me. Then it was full satisfaction to discuss with them in the evening what I had perused during the day. Thought fitted thought, opinion met opinion. We coincided, in short, perfectly. I want them to kiss so bad. I want all three of them to kiss right now. It's so beautiful when people just fit together, and they seem to fit so perfectly. Like, it's so sweet. Anyway, that's just my hopeless romantic heart bleeding. If in our trio there was a superior and a leader, it was Diana. Physically, she far excelled me. She was handsome, she was vigorous. In her animal spirits there was an affluence of life and certainty of flow, such as excited my wonder, while it baffled my comprehension. I could talk a while when the evening commenced, but the first gush of vivacity and fluency gone, I was fain to sit on a stool at Diana's feet, to rest my head on her knee, and listen alternately to her and Mary while they sounded thoroughly the topic on which I had but touched. Diana offered to teach me German. I liked to learn of her. I saw the part of instructress pleased and suited her. That of scholar pleased and suited me no less. Our natures dovetailed. Mutual affection of the strongest kind was the result. They discovered I could draw. Their pencils and color boxes were immediately at my service. My skill, greater in this one point than theirs, surprised and charmed them. Mary would sit and watch me by the hour. Mary would sit and watch me by the hour together. Then she would take lessons, and a docile, intelligent, assiduous pupil she made. Thus occupied and mutually entertained, days passed like hours and weeks like days. As to Mr. St. John, the intimacy which had arisen so naturally and rapidly between me and his sisters did not extend to him. One reason of the distance yet observed between us was that he was comparatively seldom at home. A large proportion of his time appeared devoted to visiting the sick and poor among the scattered population of his parish. No weather seemed to hinder him in these pastoral excursions. Rain or fair, he would, when his hours of morning study were over, take his hat and, followed by his father's old pointer, Carlo, go out. On his mission of love or duty, I scarcely know in which light he regarded it. Sometimes, when the day was very unfavorable, his sisters would expostulate. He would then say, with a peculiar smile, more solemn than cheerful, "And if I let a gust of wind or a sprinkling of rain turn me aside from these easy tasks, what preparation would such sloth be for the future I propose to myself?" Diana and Mary's general answer to this question was a sigh, and some minutes of apparently mournful meditation. That's strange. But besides his frequent absences, there was another barrier to friendship with him. He seemed of a reserved and abstracted. It's abstracted, and I wasn't able to figure it out. He seemed of a reserved, an abstracted, and even of a brooding nature, zealous in his ministerial labors, blameless in his life and habits. He yet did not appear to enjoy that mental serenity, that inward content, which should be the reward of every sincere Christian and practical philanthropist. Often of an evening, when he sat at the window, his desk and papers before him, he would cease reading or writing, rest his chin on his hand, and deliver himself up to I know not what course of thought, but that it was perturbed and exciting might be seen in the frequent flash and changeful dilation of his eye. Is he doing drugs? I hope he's not doing drugs. That'd be terrifying. I think, moreover, that nature was not to him that treasury of delight it was to his sisters. He expressed but once in my hearing, a strong sense of the rugged charm of the hills, and an inborn affection for the dark roof and hoary walls he called his home. But there was more of gloom than pleasure in the tone and words in which the sentiment was manifested, and never did he seem to roam the moors for the sake of their soothing silence, never seek out or dwell upon the thousand peaceful delights they could yield. You sound sad. I'm sorry, Mr. St. John. Incommunicative as he was, some time elapsed before I had an opportunity of gauging his mind. I first got an idea of its caliber when I heard him preach in his own church at Morton. I wish I could describe that sermon, but it is past my power. I cannot even render faithfully the effect it produced on me. It began calm, and indeed, as far as delivery and pitch of voice went, it was calm to the end. An earnestly felt yet strictly restrained zeal breathed soon in the distinct accents, and prompted the nervous language. This grew to force, compressed, condensed, controlled. The heart was thrilled, the mind astonished. By the power of the preacher, neither were softened. Throughout there was a strange bitterness, an absence of consolatory gentleness, stern allusions to Calvinistic doctrines, election, predestination, reprobation were frequent, and each reference to these points sounded like a sentence pronounced for doom. When he had done, instead of feeling better, calmer, more enlightened by his discourse, I experienced an inexpressible sadness, for it seemed to me, I know not whether equally so to others, that the eloquence to which I had been listening and had sprung from a depth no that the eloquence to which I had been listening had sprung from a depth where lay turbid dregs of disappointment, where moved troubling impulses of insatiate yearnings and disquieting aspirations. I was sure St. John Rivers, pure-lived, conscientious, zealous as he was, had not yet found that peace of God which passeth all understanding. He had no more found it, I thought, than had I, with my concealed and racking regrets for my broken idol and lost Elysium, regrets to which I have latterly avoided referring, but which possessed me and tyrannized over me ruthlessly. Meantime, a month was gone. Diana and Mary were soon to leave Moor House, and return to the far different life and scene which awaited them, as governesses in a large fashionable south of England city, where each held a situation in families by whose wealthy and haughty members they were regarded only as humble dependents, and who neither knew nor sought out their innate excellences. And appreciated only their acquired accomplishments, as they appreciated the skill of their cook or the taste of their waiting woman. Mr. St. John had said nothing to me yet about the employment he had promised to obtain for me. Yet it became urgent that I should have a vocation of some kind. One morning, being left alone with him a few minutes in the parlor, I ventured to approach the window recess, which his table, chair, and desk consecrated as a kind of study, and I was going to speak, though not very well knowing in what words to frame my inquiry, for it is at all times difficult to break the ice of reserve glassing over such natures as his, when he saved me the trouble by being the first to commence a dialogue. looking up as I drew near. "You have a question to ask of me?" he said. "Yes, I wish to know whether you have heard of any service I can offer myself to undertake. I found or devised something for you 3 weeks ago, but as you seemed both useful and happy here, as my sisters had evidently become attached to you, and your society gave them unusual pleasure, I deemed it inexpedient to break in on your mutual comfort till their approaching departure from Marsh End should render yours necessary." "And they will go in 3 days now," I said. "Yes, and when they go, I shall return to the parsonage at Morton. Hannah will accompany me, and this old house will be shut up." Ah! I waited a few moments, expecting he would go on with the subject first broached, but he seemed to have entered another train of reflection. His look denoted abstraction from me and my business. I was obliged to recall him to a theme which was of necessity one of close and anxious interest to me. "What is the employment you had in view, Mr. Rivers? I hope this delay will not have increased the difficulty of securing it." Uh, "Oh, no, since it is an employment which depends only on me to give and you to accept. Oh, no, not again. We don't need another Mr. Rochester." It's so funny, like knowing that me, Lillian, and Lily would have folded to Mr. Rochester so fast. Like we wouldn't have even learned about his marriage or whatever. Ugh. We need to not be so soft. He again paused. There seemed a reluctance to continue. I grew impatient. A restless movement or two, and an eager and exacting glance, fastened on his face, conveyed the feeling to him as effectually as words could have done, and with less trouble. "You need be in no hurry to hear," he said. "Let me frankly tell you, I have nothing eligible or profitable to suggest. Before I explain, recall, if you please, my notice, clearly given, that if I helped you, it must be as the blind man would help the lame. I am poor, uh, I am poor, for I find that when I have paid my father's debts, all the patrimony remaining to me will be this crumbling grange, the row of scathed firs behind, and the patch of moorish soil, with the yew trees and holly bushes in front. I am obscure. Rivers is an old name, but of the 3 sole descendants of the race, 2 earned the dependent's crust among strangers, and the third considers himself an alien from his native country, not only for life, but in death. Yes, and deems, and is bound to deem, himself honored by the lot, and aspires but after the day when the cross of separation from fleshy ties shall be laid on his shoulders, and when the head of that church militant, of whose humblest members he is one, shall give the word, 'Rise, follow me.'" Jesus Christ. St. John said these words as he pronounced his sermons with a quiet, deep voice, with an unflushed cheek and a coruscating radiance of glance. He resumed, "And since I am myself poor and obscure, I can offer you but a service of poverty and obscurity. You may even think it degrading, for I see now your habits have been what the world calls refined. Your tastes lean to the ideal, and your society has at least been amongst the educated. But I consider that no service degrades which can better our race." Ah, I hold that the more arid and unreclaimed the soil, where the Christian laborer's task of tillage is appointed him, the scantier the meed his toil brings, the higher the honor. His, under such circumstances, is the destiny of the pioneer. And the first pioneers of the gospel were the apostles. Their captain was Jesus, the Redeemer himself. Oh my God. Can he just get on with telling her what he came up with? Like, can he please? Please? I just want him to stop preaching for like a second and be like a person. Anyway. Well, I said again as he paused. Proceed. He looked at me before he proceeded. Indeed, he seemed leisurely to read my face, as if its features and lines were characters on a page. The conclusions drawn from this scrutiny he partially expressed in his succeeding observations. I believe you will accept the post I offer you, said he, and hold it for a while, not permanently, though, any more than I could permanently keep the narrow and narrowing, the tranquil, hidden office of English country incumbent, for in your nature is an alloy as detrimental to repose as that in mine, though of a different kind. Interesting. Do explain, I urged, when he halted once more. I will, and you shall hear how poor the proposal is, how trivial, how cramping. I shall not stay long at Morton, now that my father is dead, and that I am my own master. I shall leave the place probably in the course of a 12-month. But while I do stay, I will exert myself to the utmost for its improvement. Morton, when I came to it 2 years ago, had no school. The children of the poor were excluded from every hope of progress. I established one for boys. I mean now to open a second school for girls. I have hired a building for the purpose, with a cottage of 2 rooms attached to it for the mistress's house. Her salary will be £30 a year. Her house is already furnished, very simply but sufficiently, by the kindest of a lady, Miss Oliver, the only daughter of the sole rich man in my parish, Mr. Oliver, the proprietor of a needle factory and iron factory in the valley. The same lady pays for the education and clothing of an orphan from the workhouse, on condition that she shall aid the mistress in such menial offices connected with her own house, and the school, as her occupation of teaching will prevent her having time to discharge in person. Will you be this mistress? Damn. He put the question rather hurriedly. He seemed half to expect an indignant or at least disdainful rejection of the offer, not knowing all my thoughts and feelings, though guessing some. He could not tell in what light the lot would appear to me. In truth, it was humble, but then it was sheltered, and I wanted a safe asylum. It was plodding, but then compared to that of a governess in a rich house, it was independent, and the fear of servitude with strangers entered my soul like iron. It was not ignoble, not unworthy, not mentally degrading. I made my decision. I thank you for the proposal, Mr. Rivers, and I accept it with all my heart. But you comprehend me, he said. It is a village school. Your scholars will be only poor girls, cottagers' children at best, farmers' daughters. Knitting, sewing, reading, writing, ciphering will be all you will have to teach. What will you do with your accomplishments? What with the largest portion of your mind, sentiments, tastes? Save them till they are wanted. They will keep. You know what you undertake, then? I do. He now smiled, and not a bitter or sad smile, but one well pleased and deeply gratified. And when will you commence the exercise of your function? I will go to my house tomorrow and open the school, if you like, next week. Very well, so be it. He rose and walked through the room. Standing still, he again looked at me, shook his head. "What do you disapprove of, Mr. Rivers?" I asked. "You will not stay at Morton long. No, no." "Why, what is your reason for saying so?" "I read it in your eye. It is not of that description which promises the maintenance of an even tenor in life." "I am not ambitious." He started at the word ambitious. He repeated, "No. What made you think of ambition? Who is ambitious? I know I am. But how did you find it out?" "I was speaking of myself." "Well, if you are not ambitious, you are—" He paused. "What?" "I was going to say impassioned, but perhaps you would have misunderstood the word, and been displeased. I mean that human affections and sympathies have a most powerful hold on you. I am sure you cannot long be content to pass your leisure in solitude, and to devote your working hours to a monotonous labor wholly void of stimulus, any more than I can be content," he added with emphasis, "to live here buried in morass, pent in with mountains. My nature that God gave me, contravened, my faculties, heaven bestowed, paralyzed, made useless. You hear now how I contradict myself, I who preached contentment with a humble lot, and justified the vocation even of hewers of wood and drawers of water in God's service. I, his ordained minister, almost rave in my restlessness. Well, propensities and principles must be reconciled by some means." He left the room. In this brief hour I had learnt more of him than in the whole previous month, yet he still puzzled me. He left the room. No, no, no. Diana and Mary Rivers became more sad and silent as the day approached for leaving their brother and their home. They both tried to appear as usual, but the sorrow they had to struggle against was one that could not be entirely conquered or concealed. Diana intimated that this would be a different parting from any they had ever yet known. It would probably, as far as St. John was concerned, be a parting for years. It might be a parting for life. "He will sacrifice all to his long-framed resolves," she said. "Natural affection and feelings more potent still. St. John looks quiet, Jane, but he hides a fever in his vitals. You would think him gentle, yet in some things he is inexorable as death. And the worst of it is, my conscience will hardly permit me to dissuade him from his severe decision. Certainly, I cannot for a moment blame him for it. It is right, noble, Christian, yet it breaks my heart." And the tears gushed to her fine eyes. Mary bent her head low over her work. "Aw, she's gonna miss him." "We are now without father. We shall soon be without home and brother," she murmured. At that moment a little accident supervened, which seemed decreed by fate, purposely to prove the truth of the adage that misfortunes never come singly. Oh boy. And to add to their distresses, the vexing one of the slip between the cup and the lip. St. John passed the window reading a letter. He entered. "Our Uncle John is dead," said he. Both the sisters seemed struck, not shocked or appalled. The tidings appeared in their eyes rather momentous than afflicting. "Dead?" repeated Diana. "Yes." She riveted a searching gaze on her brother's face. "And what then?" she demanded in a low voice. "What then? Die?" he replied, maintaining a marble immobility of feature. "What then? Why, nothing. Read." He threw the letter into her lap. She glanced over it and handed it to Mary. Mary perused it in silence and returned it to her brother. All three looked at each other, and all three smiled, a dreary, pensive smile enough. "Oh my God, what the hell is happening?" Amen, we can yet live, said Diana at last. At any rate, it makes us no worse off than we were before, remarked Mary. Only it forces rather strongly on the mind the picture of what might have been, said Mr. Rivers, and contrasts it somewhat too vividly with what is. He folded the letter, locked it in his desk, and again went out. For some minutes no one spoke. Diana then turned to me. Yeah, this is very confusing. Jane, you will wonder at us and our mysteries, she said, and think us hard-hearted beings not to be more moved at the death of so near a relation as an uncle. But we have never seen him or known him. He was my mother's brother. My father and he quarreled long ago. It was by his advice that my father risked most of his property in the speculation that ruined him. Mutual recrimination passed between them. They parted in anger and were never reconciled. My uncle engaged afterwards in more it's prosperous. My uncle, my uncle engaged afterwards in more prosperous undertakings. It appears he realized a fortune of £20,000. He was never married and had no near kindred but ourselves and one other person, not more closely related than we. My father always cherished the idea that he would atone for his error by leaving his possessions to us. That letter informs us that he has bequeathed every penny to the other relation, with the exception of 30 guineas to be divided between St. John, Diana, and Mary Rivers, for the purchase of 3 mourning rings. He had a right, of course, to do as he pleased, and yet a momentary damp is cast on the spirits by the receipt of such news. Marian and I would have esteemed ourselves rich with £1,000 each, and to St. John such a sum would have been valuable, for the good it would have enabled him to do. Damn. This explanation given, the subject was dropped, and no further reference made to it by either Mr. Rivers or his sisters. The next day I left Marsh End for Morton. The day after, Diana and Mary quitted for the distant B. I think it's Britain. Or some place, I don't know. B. Where's a B place? I have no idea. In a week, Mr. Rivers and Hannah repaired to the parsonage, and so the old Grange was abandoned. I'm so sad about the Grange being abandoned. Let's just double checking. We are almost 100 pages away from the end. Can you believe it? It's wild to me. This has been a wild ride. I'm gonna let the ad finish up before I continue on. We're on chapter 31 now. Well, I know. And then I have to figure out what the next book we're going to read is. Because I have Dracula, I have Carmilla, and I have Frankenstein. And I think of the 2 vampire books, I'd read Carmilla first. Maybe I'll save Frankenstein for, like, Halloween, like that month. Maybe. I don't know. And then I also, I would like to read Rebecca eventually, because I love the little, like, lore behind Rebecca, where it was meant to be written as, like making fun, like a parody of Gothic romance, but it ended up being one of the best Gothic romances of all time, essentially. It's wild to think about that. Frankenstein, so we can nerd out on who is the one named Frankenstein. It's like, it's the doctor, not the monster. The monster's name is like Alan, isn't it? Like he names himself Alan or something like that. Good morning, Johnny the Bouncer. I hope you're doing well. We were just on a little bit of a tea break while an ad was rolling, and we just got to chapter 31 of Jane Eyre. And it has again been a wild ride. Absolutely wild. I just can't with this. Frankenstein is the doctor's surname, so Monster gets the name too, like a family member. Yeah. Spectacular, thank you. I hope everything has been great. It has been. I did bump my microphone. I think I might need to get a new microphone eventually. But that is a goal for when I have more flexible income. Either way, thank you all. We're going to continue on to chapter 31. My home, then, when I at last find a home, is a cottage, a little room with whitewashed walls and a sanded floor, containing 4 painted chairs and a table, a clock, a cupboard with 2 or 3 plates and dishes, and a set of tea things in delf. Above, a chamber of the same dimensions as the kitchen, with a deal bedstead and chest of drawers, small yet too large to be filled with my scanty wardrobe, though the kindness of my gentle and generous friends had increased that by a modest stock of such things as are necessary. It is evening. I have dismissed with the fee of an orange the little orphan who serves me as a handmaid. Aw. I am sitting alone on my hearth. This morning the village school opened. I had 20 scholars, but 3 of the number can read. None write or cipher, several knit, and a few sew a little. They speak with the broadest accent of the district. At present, they and I have a difficulty in understanding each other's language. Some of them are unmannered, rough, intractable, as well as ignorant, but others are docile, have a wish to learn, and evince a disposition that pleases me. I must not forget that these coarsely clad little peasants, wow, that is this book. Jane is so good at just subtly insulting people. That was so mean. She's talking about a child. She's talking about children. Coarsely clad little peasants. Okay. Are of flesh and blood as good as the scions of gentlest genealogy, and that the germs of native excellence, refinement, intelligence. I know it still took me by surprise. Of gentlest genealogy, and that the germs of native excellence, refinement, intelligence, kind feeling are as likely to exist in their hearts as in those of the best born. My duty will be to develop these germs. Surely I shall find some happiness in discharging that office. Much enjoyment I do not expect in the life opening before me, yet it will, doubtless, if I regulate my mind, and exert my powers as I ought, yield me enough to live on from day to day. Was I very gleeful, settled content during the hours I passed in yonder bare, humble schoolroom this morning and afternoon? Not to deceive myself, I must reply, no. I felt desolate to a degree. Yes, idiot that I am, I felt degraded. I doubted I had taken a step which sank instead of raising me in the scale of social existence. I was weakly dismayed at the ignorance, the poverty, the coarseness of all I heard and saw around me. But let me not hate and despise myself too much for these feelings. I know them to be wrong. That is a great step gained. I shall strive to overcome them. Tomorrow, I trust, I shall get the better of them partially, and in a few weeks perhaps they will be quite subdued. In a few months, it is possible, the happiness of seeing progress and a change for the better in my scholars may substitute gratification for disgust. She really fucking hates these children. She's like, ugh, peasant children. Ugh, away from me. Meantime, let me ask myself one question. Which is better? To have surrendered to temptation, listened to passion, made no painful effort, no struggle, but to have sunk down in the silken snare, fallen asleep on the flowers covering it, wakened in a southern clime, amongst the luxuries of a pleasure villa, to have been now living in France, Mr. Rochester's mistress, delirious with his love half my time, for he would, oh yes, he would have loved me well for a while. He did love me. No one will ever love me so again. I shall never more know the sweet homage given to beauty, youth, and grace, for never to anyone else shall I seem to possess these charms. He was fond and proud of me. It is what no man besides will ever be. But where am I wandering, and what am I saying, and above all feeling? Whether it is better, I ask, to be a slave in a fool's paradise in Marseille, fevered with delusive bliss one hour, suffocating with the bitterest tears of remorse and shame the next, or to be a village schoolmistress, free and honest, in a breezy mountain nook in the healthy heart of England. Yes, I feel now that I was right when I adhered to principle and law, and scorned and crushed the insane promptings of a frenzied moment. I was directed to the right choice. I thank I, li- I thank Providence for its guidance. Having brought my eventide musings to this point, I rose, went to my door, and looked at the sunset of the harvest day, and at the quiet fields before my cottage, which, with the school, was distant half a mile from the village. The birds were singing their last strange strains. The air was mild, the dew was balm. While I looked, I thought myself happy, and was surprised to find myself ere long weeping. And why? For the doom which had reft me from adhesion to my master. For him I was no more to see, for the desperate grief and fatal fury, consequences of my departure, which might now perhaps be dragging him from the path of right, too far to leave hope of ultimate restoration thither. At this thought I turned my face aside from the lovely sky of Eve and lonely vale of Morton. I say lonely, for in that bend of it visible to me, there was no building apparent save the church and the parsonage, half hid in the trees, and quite at the extremity the roof of Vale Hall, where the rich Mr. Oliver and his daughter lived. I hid my eyes and leant my head against the stone frame of my door, but soon a slight noise near the wicket which shut in my tiny garden from the meadow beyond it made me look up. A dog, old Carlo, Mr. Rivers' pointer, as I saw in a moment, was pushing the gate with his nose, and St. John himself leant upon it with folded arms. His brow knit, his gaze, grave almost to displeasure, fixed on me. I asked him to come in. Oh boy. No, I cannot stay. I have only brought you a little parcel my sisters left for you. I think it contains a color box, pencils, and paper. I approached to take it. A welcome gift it was. He examined my face, I thought, with austerity as I came near. The traces of tears were doubtless very visible upon it. Oh boy. Have you found your first day's work harder than you expected? He asked. Oh no, on the contrary, I think in time I shall get on with my scholars very well. But perhaps your accommodations, your cottage, your furniture have disappointed your expectations. They are in truth scanty enough, but, I interrupted, my cottage is clean and weather-proof, my furniture sufficient and commodious. All I see has made me thankful, not despondent. I am not absolutely such a fool and sensualist as to regret the absence of a carpet, a sofa, and silver plate. Besides, 5 weeks ago I had nothing. I was an outcast, a beggar, a vagrant. Now, I have acquaintance, a home, a business. I wonder at the goodness of God, the generosity of my friends, the bounty of my lot. I do not repine. But you feel solitude and oppression? The little house there behind you is dark and empty. I have hardly had time yet to enjoy a sense of tranquillity, much less to grow impatient under one of loneliness. Very well, I hope you feel the content you express me. At any rate, your good sense will tell you that it is too soon yet to yield to the vacillating fears of Lot's wife. What you had left before I saw you, of course I do not know, but I counsel you to resist firmly every temptation which would incline you to look back. Pursue your present career steadily, for some months at least. He's like, I can tell you're kind of thinking about your past. Don't do it. Don't go back. It is what I mean to do, I answered. St. John continued. One moment. I just have to check one quick thing. Oh boy. Let's see. It is hard work to control the workings of inclination and to turn the bent of nature. What, did my microphone break again? What's going on? What happened, Sumi? Jane really is just contemplating going back, and I think she should not go back. Okay. Let's see. And turn the bent of nature, that it may be done. I know from experience, um, the higher being has given us, in a measure, the power to make our own fate. And when our energies seem to demand a sustenance they cannot get, when our will strains after a path we may not follow, we need neither starve from inanition, nor stand still in despair. We have but to seek another nourishment for the mind, as strong as the forbidden food it longed to taste, and perhaps purer, and to hew out for the adventurer's foot a road as direct and broad as the one fortune blocked up against us, if rougher than it. A year ago I was myself intensely miserable, because I thought I had made a mistake in entering the ministry. Its uniform duties wearied me to death. I burnt for the more active life of the world, for the more exciting toils of a literary career, for the destiny of an artist, author, orator, anything rather than that of a priest. Yes, the heart of a politician, of a soldier, of a votary of glory, a lover of renown, a luster after power, beat under my curate's surplice. I considered my life was so wretched, it must be changed, or I must die. After a season of darkness and struggling, light broke and relief fell. My cramped existence all at once spread out to a plain without bounds. My powers heard a call from heaven to rise, gather their full strength, spread their wings, and mount beyond ken. God had an errand for me, to bear which, afar, to deliver it well, skill and strength, courage and eloquence, the best qualifications of soldier, statesman, and orator, were all needed, for these all center in the good missionary. Oh boy. A missionary I resolved to be. From that moment my state of mind changed. The fetters dissolved and dropped from every faculty, leaving nothing of bondage but its galling soreness, which time only can heal. My father indeed imposed the determination, but since his death I have not a legitimate obstacle to contend with. Some affairs settled, a successor for Morton provided, an entanglement or two of the feelings broken through or cut asunder, a last conflict with human weakness, in which I now in which I know I shall overcome, because I have vowed that I will overcome, and I leave Europe for the East. Damn. He said this in his peculiar, subdued yet emphatic voice, looking, uh, his emphatic voice, looking, when he had ceased speaking, not at me, but at the setting sun, at which I looked too. Both he and I had our backs towards the path leading up the field to the wicket. We had heard no step on that grass-grown track. Oh boy. The water running in the vale was the one lulling sound of the hour and scene. We might well then start when a happy voice, sweet as a silver bell, exclaimed, "Good evening, Mr. Rivers, and good evening, old Carlo. Your dog is quicker to recognize his friends than you are, sir. He pricked his ears and wagged his tail when I was at the bottom of the field, and you have your back towards me now. I'm scared. Who is this? I'm scared. Please don't be Mr. Rochester. Please don't be Mr. Rochester. Please don't do it." It was true, though Mr. Rivers had started at the first of those musical accents, as if a thunderbolt had split a cloud over his head. He stood yet at the close of the sentence in the same attitude in which the speaker had surprised him, his arm resting on the gate, his face directed towards the west. He turned at last with measured deliberation. A vision, as it seemed to me, had risen at his side. There appeared within 3 feet of him a form clad in pure white, a youthful, graceful form, full yet fine in contour, and when, after bending to caress Carlo, it lifted up its head and threw back a long veil, there bloomed under his glance a face of perfect beauty. Perfect beauty is a strong expression, but I do not retrace or qualify it. As sweet features as ever the temperate clime of Albion moulded, as pure hues of rose and lily as ever her humid gales and vapory skies generated and screened, justified, in this instance, the term. No charm was wanting, no defect was perceptible. The young girl had regular and delicate lineaments, eyes shaped and colored as we see them in lovely pictures, large and dark and full. The long and shadowy eyelash which encircles a fine eye with so soft a fascination, the penciled brow, which gives such clearness, the white, smooth forehead, which adds such repose to the livelier beauties of tint and ray. The cheek oval, fresh and smooth, the lips fresh too, ruddy, healthy, sweetly formed, and even and gleaming teeth without flaw, the dimpled chin, the ornament of rich, plenteous tresses, all advantages in short which, combined, realize the ideal of beauty, were fully hers. I wondered as I looked at this fair creature. I admired her with my whole heart. Nature had surely formed her in a partial mood, and forgetting her usual stinted stepmother, dole of gifts, had endowed this, her darling, with a grand dame's bounty. What did St. John Rivers think of this earthly angel? I naturally asked myself that question as I saw him turn to her and look at her, and as naturally I sought the answer to the inquiry in his countenance. He had already withdrawn his eye from the Peri. and was looking at a humble tuft of daisies which grew by the wicket. "A lovely evening, but late for you to be out alone," he said, as he crushed the snowy heads of the closed flowers with his foot. "Oh, I only came home from S." She mentioned the name of a large town some 20 miles distant. "This afternoon. Papa told me you had opened your school, and that the new mistress was come. So I put on my bonnet after tea and ran up the valley to see her. This is she," pointing at me. "It is," said St. John. "Do you think you shall like Morton?" she asked me, with a direct and naive simplicity of tone and manner, pleasing if childlike. "I hope I shall. I have many inducements to do so." Did you find your scholars as attentive as you expected?" "Quite." "Do you like your house?" "Very much." "Have I furnished it nicely?" "Very nicely indeed." "And made a good choice of an attendant for you in Alice Wood?" "You have indeed." "She is teachable and handy." This, then, I thought, was Miss Oliver, the heiress, favored, it seems, in the gifts of fortune as well as in those of nature. What happy combination of the planets presided over her birth, I wonder. Like, dang, this shit got everything. "I shall come up and help you teach sometimes," she added. "It will be a change for me to visit you now and then, and I like a change. Mr. Rivers, I have been so happy during my stay at S. Last night, or rather this morning, I was dancing till 2 o'clock. The th Regiment are stationed there since the riots, and the officers are the most agreeable men in the world. They put all our young knife grinders and scissor merchants to shame." It seemed to me that Mr. St. John's under lip protruded and his upper lip curled a moment. His mouth certainly looked a good deal compressed, and the lower part of his face unusually stern and square. As the laughing girl gave him this information, he lifted his gaze, too, from the daisies and turned it on her. An unsmiling, a searching, a meaning gaze it was. She answered it with a second laugh, and laughter well became her youth. uh, uh, Her roses, her dimples, her bright eyes. As he stood, mute and grave, she again fell to caressing Carlo. "Poor Carlo loves me," said she. "He is not stern and distant to his friends, and if he could speak, he would not be silent." Sassy. As she patted the dog's head, bending with native grace before his young and austere master, I saw a glow rise to that master's face. I saw his solemn eye melt with sudden fire and flicker with restless emotion. Flushed and kindled thus, he looked nearly as beautiful for a man as she for a woman. His chest heaved once as if his large heart, weary of despotic constriction, had expanded, despite the will, and made a vigorous bound for the attainment of liberty. But he curbed it, I think, as a resolute rider would curb a rearing steed. He responded neither by word nor movement to the gentle advances made him. "Papa says you never come to see us now," continued Miss Oliver, looking up. "You are quite a stranger at Vale Hall. He is alone this evening, and not very well. Will you return with me and visit him?" "It is not a reasonable hour to intrude on Mr. Oliver," answered St. John. "Not a reasonable hour, but I declare it is. It is just the hour when Papa most wants company, when the works are closed and he has no business to occupy him. Now, Mr. Rivers, do come. Why are you so very shy and so very somber?" She filled up the hiatus his silence left by a reply of her own. "I forgot!" she exclaimed, shaking her beautiful curled head as if shocked at herself. "I'm so giddy and thoughtless. Do excuse me. It had slipped my memory that you have good reasons to be indisposed for joining in my chatter. Diana and Mary have left you, and Morehouse is shut up, and you are so lonely. I am sure I pity you. Do come see Papa." "Not tonight, Miss Rosamond, not tonight. Ah." Mr. St. John spoke almost like an automaton. Himself only knew the effort it cost him thus to refuse. "Well, if you're so obstinate, I will leave you, for I dare not stay any longer. The dew begins to fall. Good evening." She held out her hand. He just touched it. "Good evening," he repeated, in a voice low and hollow as an echo. She turned, but in a moment. "Are you well?" she asked. Uh, "Are you well?" she asked. Well might she put the question. His face was blanched as her gown. "Quite well," he enunciated, and with a bow he left the gate. She went one way, he another. She turned twice to gaze after him as she tripped fairy-like down the field. He, as he strode firmly across, never turned at all. The spectacle of another's suffering and sacrifice rapt my thoughts from exclusive meditation on my own. Diana Rivers had designated her brother inexorable as death. She had not exaggerated. God damn, he is so in love with this lady, and she is so in love with him, it hurts. Like, they both like each other so much, and I can feel it. I continued the labors of the village school. Oh, it's chapter 32, by the way. I continued the labors of the village school as actively and faithfully as I could. It was truly hard work at first. Some time elapsed before, with all my efforts, I could comprehend my scholars and their nature. Wholly untaught, with faculties quite torpid, they seemed to me hopelessly dull, and at first sight all dull alike. But I soon found I was mistaken. There was a difference amongst them as amongst the educated, and when I got to know them, and they me, this difference rapidly developed itself. Their amazement at me, my language, my rules and ways, once subsided, I found some of these heavy-looking, gaping rustics wake up into sharp-witted girls. Enough. Well, that's mean and nice, I guess. Many showed themselves obliging, and amiable too, and I discovered amongst them not a few examples of natural politeness and innate self-respect, as well as of excellent capacity, that won both my good-will and my admiration. These soon took a pleasure in doing their work well, in keeping their persons neat, in learning their tasks regularly, in acquiring quiet and orderly manners. The rapidity of their progress, in some instances, was even surprising, and an honest and happy pride I took in it. Besides, I began to personally to like some of the best girls, and they liked me. I had amongst my scholars several farmers' daughters, young women grown almost. These could already read, write, and sew, and to them I taught the elements of grammar, geography, history, and the finer kinds of needlework. I found estimable characters amongst them, characters desirous of information and disposed for improvement, with whom I passed many a pleasant evening hour in their own homes. Their parents, their parents, then, the farmer and his wife, loaded me with attentions. There was an enjoyment in accepting their simple kindness, and in repaying it by a consideration, a scrupulous regard of their feelings, to which they were not, perhaps, at all times accustomed, and which both charmed and benefited them, because, while it elevated them in their own eyes, it made them emulous to merit the differential treatment they received. Oh my goodness. Sorry, taking another little sip. Ah, delightful. I love my tea. I felt I became a favorite in the neighborhood. Whenever I went out, I heard on all sides cordial salutations, and was welcomed with friendly smiles, to live amidst general regard. Though it be but the regard of working people, it is like sitting in sunshine, calm and sweet. Serene inward feelings bud and bloom under the ray. At this period of my life, my heart far oftener swelled with thankfulness than sank with dejection. And yet, reader, to tell you all, in the midst of this calm, this useful existence, after a day passed in honourable exertion amongst my scholars, an evening spent in drawing or reading contentedly alone, I used to rush into strange dreams at night, dreams many-coloured, agitated, full of the ideal, the stirring, the stormy, dreams where, amidst unusual scenes, charged with adventure, with agitating risk and romantic chance, I still again and again met Mr. Rochester, always at some exciting crisis, and then the sense of being in his arms, hearing his voice, meeting his eye, touching his hand and cheek, loving him, being loved by him, the hope of passing a lifetime at his side would be renewed, with all its first force and fire. Then I woke. Then I recalled where I was and how situated. Then I rose up on my curtainless bed, trembling and quivering, and then the still dark night witnessed the convulsion of despair, and heard the burst of passion. By 9 o'clock the next morning I was punctually opening the school, tranquil, settled, prepared for the steady duties of the day. Yeah, that has to be rough. Uh, Lily definitely knows how something like that can feel. Just being in a situation where honestly it's not a good idea to be in, and then leaving it, and then having a lot of lingering feelings and lingering thoughts that just don't want to go away. I'm gonna smack Jane if she goes back to Mr. Rochester, though. I absolutely will. Rosamond Oliver kept her word in coming to visit me. Her call at the school was generally made in the course of her morning ride. She would canter up to the door on her pony, followed by a mounted livery servant. Anything more exquisite than her appearance, in her purple habit, with her Amazon's cap of black velvet, placed gracefully above the long curls that kissed her cheek and floated to her shoulders, can scarcely be imagined. And it was thus she would enter the rustic building and glide through the dazzled ranks of the village children. She generally came at the hour when Mr. Rivers was engaged in giving his daily uh catechizing? I don't know. Lesson. Keenly, I fear, did the eye of the visitress pierce the young pastor's heart. A sort of instinct seemed to warn him of her entrance, and when he did not see it, and when he was looking quite away from the door, if she appeared at it, his cheek would glow, and his marble-seeming features, though they refused to relax, changed indescribably, and in their very quiescence became expressive of a repressed fervor, stronger than working muscle or darting glance could indicate. Of course, she knew her power. Indeed, he did not, because he could not conceal it from her. In spite of his Christian stoicism, when she went up and addressed him and smiled happily, encouragingly, even fondly in his face, his hand would tremble and his eyes would burn. He seemed to say, with his sad and resolute look, if he did not say it with his lips, I love you, and I know you prefer me. It is not despair of success that keeps me dumb. If I offered my heart, I believe you would accept it. But that heart is already laid on a sacred altar. The fire is arranged around it. It will soon be no more than a sacrifice consumed. God damn! God damn! John, stop! And then she would pout like a disappointed child. A pensive cloud would soften her radiant vivacity. She would withdraw her hand hastily from his, and turn in transient petulance from his aspect, at once so heroic and so martyr-like. St. John, no doubt, would have given the world to follow, recall, retain her, when she thus left him, but he would not give one chance of heaven nor relinquish for the Elysium of her love one hope of the true eternal paradise. Besides, he could not bind all that he had in his nature, the rover, the aspirant, the poet, the priest, in the limits of a single passion. He could not, he would not renounce his wild field of mission warfare for the parlors and the peace of Vale Hall. Jesus Christ. I learned so much from himself in an inroad I once, despite his reserve, had the daring to make on his confidence. Miss Oliver already honored me with frequent visits to my cottage. I had learnt her whole character, which was without mystery or disguise. She was coquettish, but not heartless, exacting, but not worthlessly selfish. She had been indulged from her birth, but was not absolutely spoiled. She was hasty, but good-humoured. Vain, she could not help it, when every glance in the glass showed her such a flush of loveliness, but not affected. Liberal-handed, innocent of the pride of wealth, ingenious, sufficiently intelligent, happy, lively, and unthinking. She was very charming, in short, even to a cool observer of her own sex like me. But she was not profoundly interesting or thoroughly impressive. A very different sort of mind was hers from that, for instance, of the sisters of St. John. Still, I liked her almost as I liked my pupil Adele, except that for a child whom we have watched over and taught, a closer affection is engendered than we can give an equally attractive adult acquaintance. That's very fair. She had taken an amiable caprice to me. She said I was like Mr. Rivers, only certainly, she allowed, not 1/10 as handsome, though I was a nice, neat little soul enough. But he was an angel. Oh, oh. I was, however, good, clever, composed, and firm, like him. I was a lusus naturae, she affirmed as a village schoolmistress. She would secure my previous history, if known, would make a delightful romance. Oh no. One evening, while with her usual childlike activity and thoughtless, yes, yet not offensive inquisitiveness, she was rummaging the cupboard and the table drawer of my kitchen. She discovered first 2 French books, a volume of Schiller, a German grammar and dictionary, and then my drawing materials and some sketches, including a pencil head of a pretty little cherub-like girl, one of my scholars, and sundry views from nature, taken in the Vale of Morton, and on the surrounding moors. She was first transfixed with surprise, and then electrified with delight. Had I done these pictures? Did I know French and German? What a love, what a miracle I was! I drew better than her master in the first school in S. Would I sketch a portrait of her to show to papa? With pleasure, I replied, and I felt a thrill of artist delight at the idea of copying from so perfect and radiant a model. She had then on a dark blue silk dress. Her arms and her neck were bare. Her only ornament was her chestnut tresses, which waved over her shoulders with all the wild grace of natural curls. I took a sheet of fine cardboard and drew a careful outline. I promised myself the pleasure of coloring it, and as it was getting late then, I told her she must come and sit another day. She made such a report of me to her father that Mr. Oliver himself accompanied her next evening, a tall, massive-featured, middle-aged, and grey-headed man, at whose side his lovely daughter looked like a bright flower near a hoary turret. He appeared a taciturn and perhaps a proud personage, but he was very kind to me. The sketch of Rosamond's portrait pleased him highly. He said I must make a finished picture of it. He insisted, too, on my coming the next day to spend the evening at Vale Hall. I went. I found it a large, handsome residence, showing upon abundant evidences of wealth and in the proprietor. Rosamond was full of glee and pleasure at the same time, all the time I stayed there. Her father was affable, and when he entered into conversation with me after tea, he expressed in strong terms his approbation of what I had done in Morton's school, and said he only feared, from what he saw and heard, I was too good for the place, and would soon quit it for one more suitable. Indeed, cried Rosamond, she is clever enough to be a governess in a high family, papa. I thought I would far rather be where I am than in any high family in the land. Mr. Oliver spoke of Mr. Rivers, of the Rivers family, with great respect. He said it was a very old name in that neighborhood, and that the ancestors of the house were wealthy, that all Morton had once belonged to them, and that even now he considered the representative of that house might, if he liked, make an alliance with the best. He accounted it a pity that so fine and talented a young man should have formed the design of going out as a missionary. It was quite throwing a valuable life away. It appeared then that her father would throw no obstacle in the way of Rosamond's union with Mr. St. John. Mr. Oliver evidently regarded the young clergyman's good birth, old name, and sacred profession as sufficient compensation for the want of fortune. Oh boy. It was the 5th of November, and a holiday. My little servant, after helping me to clean my house, was gone, well satisfied with the fee of a penny for her aid. All about me was spotless and bright, a scoured floor, polished grate, and well-rubbed chairs. Why do you rub chairs? I don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, I had also made myself neat, and had now the afternoon before me to spend as I would. The translation of a few pages of German occupied an hour, then I got my palette and pencils, and fell to the more soothing, because easier occupation of completing Rosamond Oliver's miniature. The head was finished already. There was but the background to tint and the drapery to shade off. A touch of carmine, too, to add to the ripe lips, a soft curl here and there to the tresses, a deeper tinge to the shadow of the lash under the azured eyelid. I was absorbed in the execution of these nice details when, after one rapid tap, my door unclosed, admitting St. John Rivers. I am come to see how you are spending your holiday, he said. Not, I hope, in thought. No, that is well. While you draw, you will not feel lonely. You see, I mistrust you still, though you have borne up wonderfully so far. I have brought you a book for evening solace. That's actually quite nice of him. He's like, hey, I know you're alone on this holiday, so I got you a book to read. Eesh. And he laid on the table a new publication, a poem, one of those genuine productions so often vouchsafed to the fortunate public of those days, the golden age of modern literature. Alas, the readers of our era are less favored, but courage. I will not pause either to accuse or repine. I know poetry is not dead, nor genius lost, nor has Mammon gained power over either, to bind or slay. They will both assert their existence, their presence, their liberty, and strength again one day. Powerful angels, safe in heaven, they smile when sordid souls triumph and feeble ones weep over their destruction. Poetry destroyed, genius banished? No. Mediocrity? No. Do not let envy prompt you to the thought. No, they not only live, but reign and redeem, and without their divine influence spread everywhere. You would be in hell, the hell of your own meanness. Nice. While I was eagerly glancing at the bright pages of Marmion, or Mammon, Marmion it was, St. John stooped to examine my drawing. His tall figure sprang erect with a start. He said nothing. I looked up at him. He shunned my eye. I knew his thoughts well, and could read his heart plainly. At the moment I felt calmer and cooler than he, and had then temporarily the advantage of him, and I conceived an inclination to do him some good, if I could. With all his firmness and self-control, thought I, he tasks himself too far, locks every feeling and pang within, expresses, confesses, imparts nothing. I am sure it would benefit him to talk a little about this sweet Rosamond, whom he thinks he ought not to marry. I will make him talk. Oh boy. I said first, take a chair, Mr. Rivers. But he answered, as he always did, that he could not stay. Very well, I responded, mentally. Stand if you like, but you shall not go just yet. I am determined. Solitude is at least as bad for you as it is for me. I'll try if I cannot discover the secret spring of your confidence, and find an aperture in that marble breast through which I can shed one drop of the balm of sympathy. Is this portrait like? I said bluntly. Like? Like whom? I did not observe it closely. You did, Mr. Rivers? He almost started at my sudden and strange abruptness. He looked at me astonished. Oh, that is nothing yet, I muttered within. She's like, you about to learn today, buddy. It's very funny. I don't mean to be baffled by a little stiffness on your part. I'm prepared to go to considerable lengths, I continued. You observed it closely and distinctly, but I have no objection to your looking at it again, and I rose and placed it in his hand. A well-executed picture, he said, very soft, clear coloring, very graceful and correct drawing. Yes, yes, I know all that. But what of the resemblance? Who is it like? Mastering some hesitation, he answered. Miss Oliver, I presume. Of course. And now, sir, to reward you for the accurate guess, I will promise to paint you a careful and faithful duplicate of this very picture, provided you admit that the gift would be acceptable to you. I don't wish to throw away my time and trouble on an offering you would deem worthless. Jane is such a bitch. He continued to gaze at the picture. The longer he looked, the firmer he held it, the more he seemed to covet it. It is like, he murmured. The eye is well managed, the color, light, expression are perfect. It smiles. Would it comfort or would it wound you to have a similar painting? Tell me that. When you are at Madagascar, or at the Cape, or in India, would it be a consolation to have that memento in your possession? Or would the sight of it bring recollections calculated to enervate and distress? He now furtively raised his eyes. He glanced at me, irresolute, disturbed. He again surveyed the picture. That I should like to have it is certain. Whether it would be judicious or wise is another question. Since I had ascertained that Rosamond really preferred him, and that her father was not likely to oppose the match, I, less exalted in my views than John, had been strongly disposed in my own heart to advocate their union. It seemed to me that should he become the possessor of Mr. Oliver's large fortune, he might do as much good with it as if he went and laid his genius out to wither, and his strength to waste under a tropical sun. With this persuasion I now answered. As far as I can see, it would be wiser and more judicious if you were to take to yourself the original at once. Oh boy. By this time he had sat down. He had laid the picture on the table before him, and with his brow supported on both hands, hung fondly over it. I discerned he was now neither angry nor shocked at my audacity. I saw even that to be thus frankly addressed on a subject he had deemed unapproachable, to hear it thus freely handled, was beginning to be felt by him as a new pleasure, an unhoped for relief. Reserved people often really need the frank discussion of their sentiments and griefs more than the expansive. The sternest seeming stoic is human after all, and to burst with boldness and goodwill into the silent sea of their souls is often to confer on them the first of obligations. She likes you, I am sure, said I, as I stood behind his chair, and her father respects you. Moreover, she is a sweet girl, rather thoughtless, but you would have sufficient thought for both yourself and her. You ought to marry her. And Jane, does she like me? He asked. Certainly, better than she likes anyone else. She talks of you continually. There's no subject she enjoys so much or touches upon so often. It is very pleasant to hear this, he said. Very. Go on for another quarter of an hour. And he actually took out his watch and laid it upon the table to measure the time. But where is the use of going on, I asked, when you are probably preparing some iron blow of contradiction or forging a fresh chain to fetter your heart? Don't imagine such hard things. Fancy me yielding and melting, as I am doing, human love rising like a freshly opened fountain in my mind and overflowing with sweet inundation, all the field I have so carefully and with such labor prepared, so assiduously sown with the seeds of good intentions, of self-denying plans, and now it is deluged with a nectarous flood, the young germs swamped, delicious poison cankering them. Now I see myself stretched on an ottoman in the drawing-room at Vale Hall, at my bride Rosamond Oliver's feet. She is talking to me with her sweet voice, gazing down on me with those eyes your skilful hand has copied so well, smiling at me with these coral lips. She is mine, I am hers. This present life and passing world suffice to me. Hush, say nothing. My heart is full of delight. My senses are entranced. Let the time I marked pass in peace. I humored him. The watch ticked on. He breathed fast and low. I stood silent. Amidst this hush, the quartet sped. He replaced the watch, laid the picture down, rose, and stood on the hearth. Oh boy. Now, said he, that little space was given to delirium and delusion. I rested my temples on the breast of temptation, and put my neck voluntarily under her yoke of flowers. I tasted her cup. The pillow was burning. There is an asp in the garland. The wine has a bitter taste. Her promises are hollow, her offers false. I see and know all this. I gazed at him in wonder. It is strange, pursued he, that I love Rosamond Oliver so wildly, with all the intensity indeed of a first passion, the object of which is exquisitely beautiful, graceful, fascinating. I experience at the same time a calm, unwarped consciousness that she would not make me a good wife, that she is not the partner suited to me, that I should discover this within a year after marriage, and that to 12 months' rapture would succeed a lifetime of regret. This I know. Strange indeed, I could not help but interrupting. While something in me, he went on, is acutely sensible to her charms, something else is as deeply impressed with her defects. They are such that she could sympathize in nothing I aspired to, cooperate in nothing I undertook. She could sympathize with nothing I aspired to, and cooperate in nothing I undertook. Rosamond, yeah, Rosamond, a sufferer, a laborer, a female apostle? Rosamond, a missionary's wife? No. But you need not be a missionary. You might relinquish that scheme. Relinquish what? My vocation? My great work? My foundation laid on earth for a mansion in heaven? My hopes of being numbered in the band who have merged all ambitions in the glorious one of bettering their race, of carrying knowledge into the realms of ignorance, of substituting peace for war, freedom for bondage, religion for superstition, the hope of heaven for the fear of hell? Must I relinquish that? Is it dearer than the blood in my veins? Is it what I have to look forward to and to live for? After a considerable pause, I said, "And Miss Oliver? Are her disappointment and sorrow of no interest to you?" "Miss Oliver is ever surrounded by suitors and flatterers. In less than a month my image will be effaced from her heart. She will forget me and will marry, probably, someone who will make her far happier than I should do." "You speak coolly enough, but you suffer in the conflict. You're wasting away." "No, if I get a little thin, it is with anxiety about my prospects. Yet unsettled, my departure, my departure continually procrastinated. Only this morning I received intelligence that the successor, whose arrival I had been so long expecting, cannot be ready to replace me for 3 months to come. And perhaps 3 months may extend to 6. You tremble and become flushed whenever Miss Oliver enters the schoolroom." Again the surprised expression crossed his face. He had not imagined that a woman would dare to speak so to a man. For me, I felt at home in this sort of discourse. I could never rest in communication with strong, discreet, and refined minds, whether male or female, till I had passed the outworks of conventional reserve and crossed the threshold of confidence, and won a place by their hearts' very hearthstone. "You are original," said he, "and not timid. There's something brave in your spirit, as well as penetrating in your eye. But allow me to assure you that you partially misinterpret my emotions. You think them more profound and potent than they are. You give me a larger allowance of sympathy than I have a just claim to. When I color, and when I shade before Miss Oliver, I do not pity myself. I scorn the weakness. I know it is ignoble, a mere fever of the flesh, not, I declare, the convulsion of the soul. That is just as fixed as a rock, firm set in the depths of a restless sea. Know me to be what I am, a cold, hard man." I smiled incredulously. "You have taken my confidence by storm. No, no. You have taken my confidence by storm," he continued, "and now it is much at your service. I am simply in my original state, stripped of that blood-bleached robe with which Christianity covers human deformity, a cold, hard, ambitious man. Natural affection only, of all the sentiments, has permanent power over me. Reason and not feeling is my guide. My ambition is unlimited, my desire to rise higher, to do more than others, insatiable. I honor endurance, perseverance, industry, talent, because these are the means by which men achieve great ends and mount to lofty eminence. I watch your career with interest because I consider you a specimen of a diligent, orderly, energetic woman, am not because I deeply compassionate what you have gone through, or what you still suffer." "You would describe yourself as a mere pagan philosopher," I said. "No, there's this difference between me and deistic philosophers. I believe, and I believe the gospel. You miss your epithet. I am not a pagan, but a Christian philosopher, a follower of the sect of Jesus and his disciple. I adopt his pure, his merciful, his benignant doctrines. I advocate them. I am sworn to spread them. One in youth to religion, she has cultivated my original qualities thus. From the minute germ, natural affection, she has developed the overshadowing tree, philanthropy. From the wild, stringy root of human uprightness, she has reared a due sense of divine justice, of the ambition to win power and renown for my wretched self, She has formed the ambition to spread my master's kingdom, to achieve victories for the standard of the cross. So much has religion done for me, turning the original materials to the best account, pruning and training nature. But she could not eradicate nature, nor will it be eradicated till this mortal shall put on immortality. Having said this, he took his hat, which lay on the table beside my pallet. Once more he looked at the portrait. She is lovely, he murmured. She is well named, Rose of the World indeed. And may I not paint one like it for you? Cui bono? No. He drew over the picture the sheet of thin paper on which I was accustomed to rest my hand in painting, to prevent the cardboard from being sullied. What he suddenly saw on this blank paper it was impossible for me to tell, but something had caught his eye. He took it up with a snatch. He looked at the edge, and then shot a glance at me inexpressibly peculiar and quite incomprehensible, a glance that seemed to take and make note of every point in my shape, face, and dress, for it traversed all, quick, keen as lightning. His lips parted as if to speak, but he checked the coming sentence, whatever it was. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Nothing in the world," was the reply, and, replacing the paper, I saw him dexterously tear a narrow slip from the margin. It disappeared in his glove, and with one hasty nod and "good afternoon," he vanished. Oh boy. "Well," I exclaimed, using an expression of the district, "that caps the globe, however." I, in my turn, scrutinized the paper, but saw nothing on it save a few dingy stains of paint, where I had tried the tint in my pencil. I pondered the mystery a minute or two, but finding it unsolvable, and being certain it could not be of much moment, I dismissed and soon forgot it. I feel like something is amiss. When Mr. St. John went, it was beginning to snow. The whirling storm continued all night. The next day, a keen wind brought fresh and blinding falls. By twilight the valley was drifted up and almost impassable. I had closed my shutter, laid a mat to the door to prevent the snow from blowing in under it, trimmed my fire, and after sitting nearly an hour on the hearth, listening to the muffled fury of the tempest, I lit a candle, took down Marmion, and beginning. Day set on Norm's castled steep, and Tweed's fair river, broad and deep, the Cheviots mountains lone, the massive towers the donjon keep, the flanking walls that around them sweep, in yellow lustre shone. I soon forgot storm in music. I heard a noise. The wind, I thought, shook the door. No, it was St. John Rivers, who, lifting the latch, came in out of the frozen hurricane and howling darkness, and stood before me, the cloak that covered his tall figure as white as a glacier. I was almost in consternation. So little had I expected any guess from the blocked-up vale that night. "Any ill news?" I demanded. "Has anything happened?" "No, how very easily alarmed you are," he answered, removing his cloak and hanging it up against the door, towards which he again coolly pushed the mat which his entrance had deranged. He stamped the snow from his boots. "I shall sully the purity of your floor," said he, "but you must excuse me for once." Then he approached the fire. "I've had hard work to get here, I assure you," he observed as he warmed his hands over the flame. "One drift took me up to the waist. Happily, the snow is quite soft yet." "But why are you come?" I could not forbear saying. Oh boy. Rather an inhospitable question to put to a visitor, but since you ask it, I answer simply, to have a little talk with you. I got tired of my mute books and empty rooms. Besides, since yesterday I have experienced the excitement of a person whom a tale has been half told, and who is impatient to hear the sequel. I'm scared. He sat down. I recalled his singular conduct of yesterday, and really I began to fear his wits were touched. If he were insane, however, he was a very cool and collected insanity. I had never seen that handsome-featured face of his look more like chiseled marble than it did just now, as he put aside his snow-wet hair from his forehead and let the firelight shine free on his pale brow and cheek as pale, where it grieved me to discover the hollow trace of care or sorrow so plainly graved. I waited, expecting he would say something I could at least comprehend, but his hand was now at his chin, his finger on his lip. He was thinking. It struck me that his hand looked wasted like his face, and perhaps uncalled for gush of pity came over my heart. I was moved to say, I wish Mary or Diana would come and live with you. It is too bad that you should be quite alone, and you are recklessly rash about your own health. Not at all, said he. I care for myself when necessary. I am well now. What do you see amiss in me? This was said with a careless, abstracted indifference, which showed that my solicitude was, at least in his opinion, wholly superfluous. I was silenced. He still slowly moved his finger over his upper lip, and still his eye dwelt dreamily on the glowing grate. Thinking it urgent to say something, I asked him presently if he felt any cold draught from the door, which was behind him. No, no, he responded shortly and somewhat testily. This guy's being a dick. Well, I reflected, if you won't talk, you may be still. I'll let you alone now and return to my book. So I snuffed the candle and resumed the perusal of Marmion. He soon stirred. My eye was instantly drawn to his movements. He only took out a morocco pocket-book, thence produced a letter, which he read in silence, folded it, put it back, relapsed into meditation. It was vain to try to read with such an inscrutable fixture before me, nor could I, in impatience, consent to be dumb. He might rebuff me if he liked, but talk I would. Have you heard from Diana and Mary lately? Not since the letter I showed you a week ago. There has not been any change made about your own arrangements? You will not be summoned to leave England sooner than you expected? I fear not, indeed. Such chance is too good to befall me. Baffled so far, I changed my ground. I bethought myself to talk about the school and my scholars. Mary Garrett's mother is better, and Mary came back to the school this morning, and I shall have 4 new girls next week from the foundry close. They would have come today but for the snow. Indeed. Mr. Oliver pays for 2. Does he? He means to give the whole school a treat at Christmas. I know. Was it your suggestion? No. Whose then? His daughter's, I think. He's so angry. He's so testy. It is like her. She is good-natured. Yes. Oh my god. Please just fucking talk. Again came the blank of a pause. The clock struck 8 strokes. It aroused him. He uncrossed his legs, sat erect, turned to me. Leave your book a moment and come a little nearer the fire, he said. Wondering, and of my wonder finding no end, I complied. Half an hour ago, he pursued, I spoke of my impatience to hear the sequel of a tale. On reflection, I find the matter will be better managed by my assuming the narrator's part, and converting you into a listener. Before commencing, it is but fair to warn you that the story will sound somewhat hackneyed in your ears. but stale details often regain a degree of freshness when they pass through new lips. For the rest, whether trite or novel, it is short. 20 years ago, a poor curate, never mind his name at this moment, fell in love with a rich man's daughter. She fell in love with him and married him, against the advice of all her friends, who consequently disowned her immediately after the wedding. Before 2 years passed, the rash pair were both dead, and laid quietly side by side under one slab. I have seen their grave. It formed part of the pavement of a huge churchyard surrounding the grim, soot-black old cathedral of an overgrown manufacturing town in Blankshire. They left a daughter, which, at its very birth, Charity received in her lap, cold as that of the snowdrift I almost stuck fast in tonight. Thank you for the hydrate. I'm gonna take a little sippy sip of my tea. I don't know where this is going. I'm scared, though. I feel like Mr. John knows something. See. Okay, they left a daughter, which at its very birth Charity received in her lap. Cold as that was of the snowdrift, I almost stuck fast in tonight. Charity carried the friendless thing to the house of its rich maternal relations. It was reared by an aunt-in-law, called, I come to names now, Mrs. Reed of Gateshead. You start. Did you hear a noise? I dare say it is only a rat scrambling along the rafters of the adjoining schoolroom. It was a barn before I had it repaired and altered, and barns are generally haunted by rats. To proceed, Mrs. Reed kept the orphan 10 years. Whether it was happy or not with her, I cannot say, never having been told. But at the end of that time, she transferred it to a place you know, being no other than Lawwood School. Oh shit, he knows who she is. Where you so long resided yourself. It seems her career there was very honorable. From a pupil, she became a teacher like yourself. Really, it strikes me there are parallel points in her history and yours. She left it to be a governess. There again, your were analogous. She undertook the education of the ward of a certain Mr. Rochester. Mr. Rivers, I interrupted. I can guess your feelings, he said, but restrain them for a while. I have nearly finished. Hear me to the end. Of Mr. Rochester's character I know nothing, but the one fact that he professed to offer honorable marriage to this young girl, and that at the very altar she discovered he had a wife yet alive, though a lunatic. What his subsequent conduct and proposals were is a matter of pure conjecture. But when an event transpired which rendered inquiry after the governess necessary, it was discovered that she was gone. No one could tell when, where, or how. She had left Thornfield Hall in the night. Every research after her course had been vain. The country had been scoured far and wide. No vestige of information could be gathered respecting her. Yet that she should be found is to become a matter of serious urgency. Advertisements have been put in all the papers. I myself have received a letter from one Mr. Briggs, a solicitor, communicating the details I have just imparted. Is it not an odd tale? Oh, God. He's like, I know what you're doing, buddy. I know who you are. And I'm like, oh, shit. Just tell me this, said I. Since you know so much, you surely can tell it me. What of Mr. Rochester? How and where is he? What is he doing? Is he well? I am ignorant of all concerning Mr. Rochester. The letter never mentions him, but to narrate the fraudulent and illegal attempt I have adverted to. You should rather ask the name of the governess, the nature of the event which requires her appearance. Oh boy. Did no one go to Thornfield Hall then? Did no one see Mr. Rochester? I suppose not. But they wrote to him, of course. And what did he say? Who has his letters? Mr. Briggs intimates that the answer to his application was not from Mr. Rochester, but from a lady. It is signed Alice Fairfax. Aw, Mrs. Fairfax. Aw. I felt cold and dismayed. My worst fears, then, were probably true. He had, in all probability, left England and rushed in reckless desperation to some former haunt on the continent. And what opiate for his severe sufferings, what object for his strong passions had he sought there? I dared not answer the question. Oh, my poor master, once almost my husband, whom I had often called my dear Edward. He must have been a bad man, observed Mr. Rivers. You don't know him. Don't pronounce an opinion upon him, I said with warmth. Very well, he answered quietly. And indeed my head is otherwise occupied than with him. I have my tale to finish. Since you won't ask the governess's name, I must tell it of my own accord. Stay, I have it here. It is always more satisfactory to see important points written down, fairly committed to black and white. And the pocketbook was again deliberately produced, opened, sought through. From one of its compartments was extracted a shabby slip of paper, hastily torn off. I recognized in its texture and its stain of ultramarine and lake and vermilion the ravished margin of the portrait cover. He got up, held it close to my eyes, and I read, traced in Indian ink, in my own handwriting, the words Jane Eyre, the work doubtless of some moment of abstraction. Uh-oh. She got caught. I mean, she's not a criminal. She didn't do anything wrong. Like, it's not like it. She can't get arrested or anything. She just fucking left. Anyway, Briggs wrote to me of a Jane Eyre, he said. The advertisements demanded a Jane Eyre. I knew a Jane Elliot. I confess I had my suspicions, but it was only yesterday afternoon. They were at once resolved into certainty. You own the name and renounce the alias? Yes, but where is Mr. Briggs? He perhaps knows more of Mr. Rochester than you do. Oh, God, come on. Briggs is in London. I should doubt his knowing anything at all about Mr. Rochester. It is not in Mr. Rochester he is interested. Meantime, you forget essential points in pursuing trifles. You do not inquire why Mr. Briggs sought after you, what he wanted with you. Well, what did he want? Merely to tell you that your uncle, Mr. Eyre of Madeira, is dead, that he has left you all his property, and that you are now rich. Merely that, nothing more. I rich? Yes, you, rich, quite an heiress. Silence succeeded. Oh boy. You must prove your identity, of course, resumed St. John presently, a step which will offer no difficulties. You can then enter on immediate possession. Your fortune is vested in the English funds. Briggs has the will and the necessary documents. Here was a new card turned up. It was a fine thing, reader, to be lifted in a moment from indigence to wealth, a very fine thing, but not a matter one can comprehend, or consequently enjoy, all at once. And then there are other chances in life far more thrilling and rapture-giving. This is solid, an affair of the actual world, nothing ideal about it. All its associations are solid and sober, and its manifestations are the same. One does not jump and spring and shout hurrah. At hearing one has got a fortune, one begins to consider responsibilities, and to ponder business. On a base of steady satisfaction rise certain grave cares, and we contain ourselves and brood over our bliss with a solemn brow. Besides, the words legacy, bequest go side by side with the words death, funeral. My uncle, I had heard, was dead, my only relative. Ever since being made aware of his existence, I had cherished the hope of one day seeing him. Now I never should. And then this money came only to me, not to me and a rejoicing family, but to my isolated self. It was a grand boon, doubtless, and independence would be glorious, yes. I felt that. That thought swelled in my heart. You unbend your forehead at last, said Mr. Rivers. I thought Medusa had looked at you, and that you were turning to stone. Perhaps now you will ask how much you are worth. How much am I worth? Oh, a trifle, nothing of course to speak of. 20,000 pounds, I think they say. But what is that? 20,000 pounds? Here was a new stunner. I had been calculating on 4 or 5,000. This news actually took my breath for a moment. Mr. St. John, whom I had never heard laugh before, laughed now. Well, said he, if you had committed a murder, and I had told you your crime was discovered, you could scarcely look more aghast. That's very funny. It's like, you look like I just told you that you've been caught with a murder, and yet I'm here telling you that you're fabulously wealthy. What's wrong with you? It is a large sum, don't you think there is a mistake? No mistake at all. Perhaps you have read the figures wrong. It may be 2,000. It is written in letters, not figures. 20,000. I again felt rather like an individual of but average gastronomical powers, sitting down to feast alone at a table spread with provisions for 100. Mr. Rivers rose now and put his cloak on. If it were not such a very wild night, he said, I would send Hannah down to keep you company. You look too desperately miserable to be left alone, but Hannah, poor woman, could not stride the drifts so well as I. Her legs are not quite so long, so I must e'en leave you to your sorrows. Good night. He was lifting the latch. A sudden thought occurred to me. Uh-oh. Stop 1 minute, I cried. Well? It puzzles me to know why Mr. Briggs wrote to you about me, or how he knew you, or could fancy that you, living in such an out-of-the-way place, had the power to aid in my discovery. Oh, I am a clergyman, he said, and the clergy are often appealed to about odd matters. Again the latch rattled. No, that does not satisfy me, I exclaimed, and indeed there was something in the hasty and unexplanatory reply which, instead of allaying, piqued my curiosity more than ever. It is a very strange piece of business, I added. I must know more about it. Another time. No, tonight, tonight. And as he turned from the door, I placed myself between it and him. Yeah, that's fair. He looked rather embarrassed. You certainly shall not go till you have told me all, I said. I would rather not just now. You shall, you must. I would rather Diana or Mary informed you. Uh-oh. What's going on? Of course, these objections wrought my eagerness to a climax, gratified it must be, and that without delay, and I told him so. But I apprised you that I was a hard man, said he, difficult to persuade, and I am a hard woman, impossible to put off. I love that back and forth. And then he pursued, I am cold, no fervor infects me, whereas I am hot, and fire dissolves ice. The blaze there has thawed all the snow from your cloak. By the same token, it has streamed on to my floor, and made it like a trampled street. As you hope ever to be forgiven, Mr. Rivers, the high crime and misdemeanor of spoiling a sanded kitchen, tell me what I wish to know. Like, you ruined my floors. Using propriety to her advantage is hilarious, by the way. Well then, he said, I yield, if not to your earnestness, to your perseverance, as stone is worn by continual dropping. Besides, you must know some day, as well now as later. Your name is Jane Eyre? Of course, that was all settled before. You are not, perhaps, aware that I am your namesake, that I was christened Saint John Eyre Rivers. Uh-oh. No, indeed. I remember now seeing the letter E comprised in your initials written in books you have different times lent me. But I never asked for what name it stood. But what then? Surely I stopped. I could not trust myself to entertain, much less to express, the thought that rushed upon me, that embodied itself, that in a second stood out a strong, solid probability. Circumstances knit themselves, fitted themselves, shot into order. The chain that had been lying hitherto a formless lump of links was drawn out straight. Every ring was perfect, the connection complete. I knew by instinct how the matter stood, before St. John had said another word. But I cannot expect the reader to have the same intuitive perception, so I must repeat his explanation. My mother's name was Jane. She had two brothers, one a clergyman who married Miss Jane Reed of Gateshead, the other Jane Eyre, Esquire, merchant, late of the Funchal, Madeira. Mr. Briggs, being Mr. Eyre's solicitor, wrote to us last August to inform us of our uncle's death, and to say that he had left his property to his brother the clergyman's orphan daughter, overlooking us in consequence of a quarrel never forgiven between him and my father. He wrote again a few weeks since to intimate that the heiress was lost, and asking if we knew anything of her. A name casually written on a slip of paper has enabled me to find her out. You know the rest. Again he was going, but I set my back against the door. Do let me speak, I said. Let me have one moment to draw breath and reflect. I paused. He stood before me, hat in hand, looking composed enough. I resumed. Your mother was my father's sister. Yes. My aunt, consequently. He bowed. My Uncle John was your Uncle John. You, Diana, and Mary are his sister's children, as I am his brother's child. Undeniably. You three, then, are my cousins. Half our blood on each side flows from the same source. We are cousins, yes. I surveyed him. It seemed I had found a brother, one I could be proud of, one I could love, and two sisters whose qualities were such that, when I knew them but as mere strangers, they had inspired me with genuine affection and admiration. The two girls, on whom, kneeling down on the wet ground, and looking through the low latticed window of the Moor House kitchen, I had gazed with so bitter a mixture of interest and despair, were my near kinswomen, and the young and stately gentleman who had found me almost dying at his threshold was my blood relation. Glorious discovery to a lonely wretch! This was wealth indeed, wealth to the heart, a mine of pure, genial affections. This was a blessing, bright, vivid, and exhilarating, not like the ponderous gift of gold, rich and welcome enough in its way, but sobering from its weight. I now clapped my hands in sudden joy. My pulse bounded, my veins thrilled. "Oh, I'm glad, I exclaimed. John smiled. "Did I not say you neglected essential points to pursue trifles?" he asked. "You were serious when I told you you had got a fortune, and now for a matter of no moment you are excited. What can you mean?" "It may be of no moment to you. You have sisters and don't care for a cousin. But I had nobody, and now three relations, or two if you don't choose to be counted, are born into my world full grown. I say again, I am glad. Ah!" I walked fast enough through the room. I stopped, half suffocated with the thoughts that arose faster than I could receive, comprehend, settle them. Thoughts of what might, could, would, and should be. And that ere long I looked at the blank wall. It seemed a sky thick with ascending stars. Every one lit me to a purpose or delight. Those who had saved my life, whom till this hour I had loved barrenly, I could now benefit. They were under a yoke. I could free them. They were scattered. I could reunite them. The independence, the affluence which was mine, might be theirs too. Were we not four? 20,000 pounds shared equally would be 5,000 each. Justice, enough and to spare. Justice would be done. Mutual happiness secured. Now the wealth did not weigh on me. Now it was not a mere bequest of coin. It was a legacy of life, hope, enjoyment. How I looked while these ideas were taking my spirit by storm I cannot tell, but I perceived soon that Mr. Rivers had placed a chair behind me and was gently attempting to make me sit down on it. He also advised me to be composed. I scorned the insinuation of helplessness and distraction, shook off his hand, and began to walk about again. Write to Diana and Mary tomorrow, I said, and tell them to come home directly. Diana said they would both consider themselves rich with 1,000 pounds, so with 5,000 they will do very well. Tell me where I can get you a glass of water, said St. John. You must really make an effort to tranquilize your feelings. Nonsense! And what sort of an effect will the bequest have on you? Will it keep you in England, induce you to marry Miss Oliver, and settle down like an ordinary mortal? You wander, your head becomes confused. You have been too abrupt in communicating the news. It has excited you. No, I have been too abrupt in communicating the news. It has excited you beyond your strength. Oh, shut the fuck up. Shut up, John. Mr. Rivers, you quite put me out of patience. I am rational enough. It is you who misunderstand, or rather who affect to misunderstand. Perhaps if you explained yourself a little more fully, I should comprehend better. Explain? What is there to explain? You cannot fail to see that 20,000 pounds, the sum in question, divided equally between the nephew and 3 nieces of our uncle, will give 5,000 to each. What I want is that you should write to your sisters and tell them of the fortune that is accrued to them. To you, you mean. I have intimated my view of the case. I am incapable of taking any other. I am not brutally selfish, blindly unjust, or fiendishly ungrateful. Besides, I am resolved. I will have a home and connections. I like Moor House, and I will live at Moor House. I like Diana and Mary, and I will attach myself for life to Diana and Mary. It would please and benefit me to have 5,000 pounds. It would torment and oppress me to have 20,000, which, moreover, could never be mine in justice, though it might in law. I abandon to you, then, what is absolutely superfluous to me. Let there be no opposition and no discussion about it. Let us agree amongst each other and decide the point at once. This is acting on first impulses. You must take days to consider such a matter, ere your word can be regarded as valid. Oh, if all you doubt is my sincerity, I am easy. You see justice of the case? I do see a certain justice, but it is contrary to all custom. Besides, the entire fortune is your right. My uncle gained it by his own efforts. He was free to leave it to whom he would. He left it to you. After all, justice permits you to keep it. You may. The clear conscience, consider it absolutely your own. Oh my God. I'm gonna punch John in the face, by the way. I'm like so close to just smacking this boy. With me, said I, it is fully as much a matter of feeling as of conscience. I must indulge my feelings. I so seldom have had an opportunity of doing so. Were you to argue, object, and annoy me for a year, I could not forego the delicious pleasure of which I have caught a glimpse, that of repaying in part a mighty obligation, and winning to myself lifelong friends. You think so now, rejoined St. John, because you do not know what it is to possess. Thank you so much for the follow. I hope you're enjoying my reading of Jane Eyre. Really appreciate it. Nor consequently to enjoy wealth. You cannot form a notion of the importance 20,000 pounds would give you, of the place it would enable you to take in society, of the prospects it would open to you. You cannot. And you, I interrupted, cannot at all imagine the craving I have for fraternal and sisterly love. I never had a home. I never had brothers or sisters. I must and will have them now. You are not reluctant to admit me and own me, are you? Jane, I will be your brother, my sisters will be your sisters, without stipulating for the sacrifice of your just rights. Shut the heck up. Oh my god, I'm gonna. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's done by Bila RBS. Just letting you know, okay? They are, and Bila RBS and Cyanida. You can see there how it's spelled in my about section. There's a credits area. Brother, yes, at the distance of 1,000 leagues. Sisters, yes, slaving amongst strangers. I, wealthy, gorged with gold I never earned and do not merit. You, penniless, famous equality and fraternization, close reunion, intimate attachment. But Jane, your aspirations after family ties and domestic happiness must be realized otherwise than by the means you contemplate. You may marry. Nonsense again. Marry? I don't want to marry, and never shall marry. Oh, yeah, they are. Thank you. We worked together for a very long time coming up with it and going over all the details. That is saying too much. Such hazardous affirmations are a proof of the excitement under which you labor. John, this guy, losing my mind. It is not saying too much. I know what I feel, and how averse are my inclinations to the bare thought of marriage. No one would take me for love, and I will not be regarded in the light of a mere money speculation. I do not want a stranger, unsympathizing, alien, different from me. I want my kindred, those with whom I have full fellow feeling. Say again you will be my brother. When you uttered the words I was satisfied, happy. Repeat them if you can. Repeat them sincerely. I think I can. I know I've always loved my own sisters, and I know on what my affection for them is grounded. Respect for their worth and admiration of their talents. You too have principle in mind. Your tastes and habits resemble Diana's and Mary's. Your presence is always agreeable to me. In your conversation I have already for some time found a salutary solace. I feel I can easily and naturally make room in my heart for you, as my third and youngest sister. Thank you. Your content that contents me for the night. Now you had better go, for if you stay longer, you will perhaps irritate me afresh by some mistrustful scruple. And the school, Miss Eyre? It must now be shut up, I suppose. No, I will retain my post of mistress till you get a substitute. He smiled approbation. We shook hands, and he took leave. I need not narrate in detail further struggles I had, and arguments I used, to get matters regarding the legacy settled as I wished. My task was a very hard one, but as I was absolutely resolved, as my cousins saw at length my mind was really and immutably fixed on making a just division of the property, as they must in their own hearts have felt the equity of the intention, and must besides have been innately conscious that in my place they would have done precisely what I wished to do. They yielded at length so far as to consent to put the affair to arbitration. The judges chosen were Mr. Oliver and an able lawyer. Both coincided in my opinion. I carried my point. The instruments of transfer were drawn out. St. John, Diana, Mary, and I each became possessed of a competency. It was near Christmas by the time all was settled. The season of general holiday approached. I now closed Morton School, taking care that the parting should not be barren on my side. Good fortune opens the hand as well as the heart wonderfully, and to give somewhat when we have largely received is but to afford a vent to the unusual ebullition of the sensations. I had long felt the pleasure that many of my rustic scholars liked me, and when we parted, that consciousness was confirmed. They manifested their affection plainly and strongly. Deep was my gratification to find I had really a place in their unsophisticated hearts. Why is she still insulting them? It's so mean. And anyway, I promised them that never a week should pass in the future that I did not visit them and give them an hour's teaching at their school. Mr. Rivers came up as, having seen the classes now numbering 60 girls file up before me, and locked the door. I stood with the key in my hand, exchanging a few words of special farewell with some half-dozen of my best scholars, as decent, respectable, modest, and well-informed young women as could be found in the ranks of the British peasantry. And that is saying a great deal, for after all, the British peasantry are the best taught, best mannered, most self-respecting of any in Europe. Since those days, I have seen Paysons and Brownin, and the best of them seemed to me ignorant, coarse, and besotted compared with my Morton girls. Aw. You consider you have got your reward for a season of exertion, asked Mr. Rivers when they were gone. Does not the consciousness of real having done some real good in your day and generation give pleasure? Doubtless. And you have only toiled a few months. Would not a life devoted to the task of regenerating your race be well spent? Yes, I said, but I could not go on forever so. I want to enjoy my own faculties as well as to cultivate those of other people. I must enjoy them now. Don't recall either my mind or body to the school. I am out of it, and disposed for full holiday. He looked grave. What now? What sudden eagerness is this you evince? What are you going to do? To be active as I can, and first I must beg you to set Hannah at liberty, and get somebody else to wait on you. Do you want her? Yes, to go with me to Moor House. It's going well. I hope your day is going well, too. Just reading a book. I like reading books. But yeah, it's going well. Yes, to go with me to Moor House. Diana and Mary will be at home in a week, and I want to have everything in order against their arrival. I understand. I thought you were flying off on some excursion. It is better so. Hannah shall go with you. Ah, I'm glad. I hope you're feeling nice and cozy and comfy and having just generally fun. Tell her to be ready by tomorrow then, and here's the schoolroom key. I'll give you the key of my cottage in the morning. He took it. You give it up very gleefully, said he. I don't quite understand your light-heartedness, because I cannot tell what employment you propose to yourself as a substitute for the one you are relinquishing. What aim, what purpose, what ambition in life have you now? My first aim will be to clean down. Do you comprehend the full force of the expression? To clean down Moor House from chamber to cellar. My next to rub it up with beeswax, oil, and an indefinite number of cloths, till it glitters again. My third, to arrange every chair, table, bed, carpet, with mathematical precision. Afterwards I shall go near to ruin you in coals and peat, to keep up good fires in every room. And lastly, the 2 days preceding that on which your sisters are expected will be devoted by Hannah and me to such a beating of eggs, sorting of currants, grating of spices, compounding of Christmas cakes, chopping up of materials for mince pies, and solemning of other culinary rites, as words can convey but an inadequate notion of the uninitiated like you. My purpose, in short, is to have all things in an absolutely perfect state of readiness for Diana and Mary before next Thursday, and my ambition is to give them a beau ideal of a welcome when they come. St. John smiled slightly. Still, he was dissatisfied. It is all very well for the present, said he, but seriously, I trust that when the first flush of vivacity is over, you will look a little higher than domestic endearments and household joys. The best things the world has, I offer. I interrupted. No, Jane, no. This world is not the scene of fruition. Do not attempt to make it so, nor the rest. Do not turn slothful. I mean, on the contrary, to be busy. Jane, I excuse you for the present. 2 months' grace I will allow you for the full enjoyment of your new position, and for pleasing yourself with this late-found charm of relationship. But then, I hope you will begin to look up beyond Moor House and Morton, and sisterly society, and the selfish calm and sensual comfort of civilized affluence. I hope your energies will then once more trouble you with their strength. I looked at him with surprise. St. John, I said, I think you are almost wicked to talk so. I am disposed to be as content as a queen, and you try to stir me up to restlessness? To what end? To the end of turning to profit the talents which Gon committed to your keeping, and of which he will surely one day demand a strict account, Jane. I shall watch you closely and anxiously, I warn you of that, and try to restrain the disproportionate fervor with which you throw yourself into commonplace home pleasures. Don't cling so tenaciously to ties of the flesh. Save your constancy and ardor for an adequate cause. Forbear to waste them on trite transient objects. Do you hear, Jane? He's so naggy. Why he nagging? Why you gotta be like that? Just let her have fun. Yes, just as if you were speaking Greek. I feel I have adequate cause to be happy, and I will be happy. Aw, thank you. I love them. Goodbye. Happy at Moor House I was, and hard I worked, and so did Hannah. She was charmed to see how jovial I could be amidst the bustle of a house turned topsy-turvy, how I could brush and dust and clean and cook. And really, after a day or two of confusion worse confounded, it was delightful by degrees to invoke order from the chaos ourselves had made. I had previously taken a journey to S to purchase some new furniture, my cousins having given me carte blanche to effect what alterations I pleased, and a sum having been set aside for that purpose. The ordinary sitting-room and bedroom I left much as they were, for I knew Diana and Mary would derive more pleasure from seeing again the old homely tables and chairs and beds than from the spectacle of the smartest innovations. Still, some novelty was necessary to give their return the piquancy with which I wished to be invested. Dark, handsome new carpets and curtains, an arrangement of some carefully selected antique ornaments in porcelain and bronze, new coverings and mirrors and dressing cases for the toilet tables answered the end. They looked fresh without being glaring. A spare parlor and bedroom I refurnished entirely, with old mahogany and crimson upholstery. I laid canvas on the passage and carpets on the stairs. When all was finished, I thought Moor House was Moor House as complete a model of bright, modest snugness within, as it was at this season a specimen of wintry waste and desert dreariness without. The eventful Thursday at length came. They were expected about dark, and ere dusk fires were lit upstairs and below. The kitchen was in perfect trim. Hannah and I were dressed, and all was in readiness. St. John arrived first. I had entreated him to keep quite clear of the house till everything was arranged, and, indeed, the bare idea of the commotion, at once sordid and trivial, going on with its walls sufficed to scare him to estrangement. He found me in the kitchen, watching the progress of certain cakes for tea, then baking. Approaching the hearth, he asked if I was at last satisfied with if I was at last satisfied with housemaid's work. I answered by inviting him to accompany me on a general inspection of the result of my labors. With some difficulty, I got him to make the tour of the house. He just looked in at the doors I opened, and when he had wandered upstairs and downstairs, he said I must have gone through a great deal of fatigue and trouble to have effected such considerable changes in so short a time. But not a syllable did he utter, indicating pleasure in the improved aspect of his abode. This bitch. This silence damped me. I thought perhaps the alterations had disturbed some old associations he valued. I inquired whether this was the case, no doubt in a somewhat crestfallen tone. Not at all. He had, on the contrary, remarked that I had scrupulously respected every association. He feared, indeed, I must have bestowed more thought on the matter than it was worth. How many minutes, for instance, had I devoted to studying the arrangements of this very room? By the by, I could tell him where such a book was. I showed him the volume on the shelf. He took it down, and withdrawing to his accustomed window recess, he began to read it. Now, I did not like this, reader. St. John was a good man, but I began to feel he had spoken truth of himself when he said he was hard and cold. The humanities and amenities of life had no attraction for him, its peaceful enjoyments no charm. Literally, he lived only to aspire, after what was good and great, certainly, but still he would never rest, not approve of others resting around him. As I looked at his lofty forehead, still and pale as a white stone, at his fine lineaments fixed in study, I comprehended all at once that he would hardly make a good husband, that it would be a trying thing to be his wife. I understood, as by inspiration, the nature of his love for Miss Oliver. I agreed with him that it was but a love of the senses. I comprehended how he should despise himself for the feverish influence it exercised over him, how he should wish to stifle and destroy it, how he should mistrust its ever conducting permanently to his happiness or hers. Yeah, I saw he was of the material from which nature hews her heroes, Christian and pagan, her lawgivers, her statesmen, her conquerors, steadfast bulwark for great interests to rest upon, but at the fireside too often a cold, cumbrous column, gloomy and out of place. This parlor is not his sphere, I reflected. Himalayan ridge or calf bush, even the plague-cursed Guinea Coast swamp, would suit him better. Well may he eschew the calm of domestic life. It is not his element. There his faculties stagnate. They cannot develop or appear to advantage. It is in scenes of strife and danger, where courage is proved and energy exercised, and fortitude tasked, that he will speak and move, the leader and superior. A merry child would have the advantage of him on this hearth. He is right to choose a missionary's career. I see it now. They're coming, they're coming, cried Hannah, throwing open the parlor door. At the same moment old Carlo barked joyfully. Out I ran. Ugh. It was now dark, but a rumbling of wheels was audible. Hannah soon had a lantern lit. The vehicle had stopped at the wicket. The driver opened the door. First one well-known form, then another stepped out. In a minute I had my face under their bonnets, in contact first with Mary's soft cheek, then with Diana's flowing curls. I feel kind of guilty about imagining them being together because I didn't know they were cousins. Whoops. You know, sisterly love's just fine. That they can stick to that. They laughed, kissed me, then Hannah patted Carlo, who was half wild with delight, asked eagerly if all was well, and being assured in the affirmative, hastened into the house. They were stiff with their long and jolting drive from Whitcross, and chilled with the frosty night air, but their pleasant countenances expanded to the cheerful firelight, while the driver and Hannah brought in the boxes. They demanded St. John. At this moment he advanced from the parlor. They both threw their arms round his neck at once. He gave each one a quiet kiss, said in a low tone a few words of welcome, stood a while to be talked to, and then, intimating that he supposed they would soon rejoin him in the parlor, withdrew there as to a place of refuge. Ah, I had lit their candles to go upstairs, but Diana had first to give hospitable orders respecting the driver. This done, both followed me. They were delighted with the renovation and decorations of their rooms. The promise I'll never break. Aw, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I know that it's not usually what ASMR streams are, but I personally think that a nice, cozy reading stream is nice to enjoy. They were delighted with the renovation and decorations of their rooms, with the new drapery and fresh carpets and rich tinted china vases. They expressed their gratification ungrudgingly. I had the pleasure of feeling that my arrangements met their wishes exactly, and that what I had done added a vivid charm to their joyous return home. Sweet was that evening. My cousins, full of exhilaration, were so eloquent in narrative and comment that their fluency covered St. John's taciturnity. He was sincerely glad to see his sisters, but in their glow of fervor and flow of joy he could not sympathize. The event of the day, that is, the return of Diana and Mary, pleased him. Aw, thank you. I'm glad. I'm glad. I really appreciate you. Thank you for joining my community and offering such kind words. The return of Diana and Mary pleased him, but the accompaniments of that event, the glad tumult, the garrulous glee of reception irked him. I saw he wished the calmer morrow was come. In the very meridian of the night's enjoyment, about an hour after tea, a rap was heard at the door. Boy, I'm scared. Hannah entered with the intimation that a poor lad was come, at that unlikely time, to fetch Mr. Rivers to see his mother, who was drawing away. Where does she live, Hannah? Up at Whitcross Brow, almost 4 miles off, and moor and moss all the way. Tell him I will go. I'm sure, sir, you had better not. It's the worst road to travel after dark that can be. There's no track at all over the bog. And then it is such a bitter night, the keenest wind you ever felt. You had better send word, sir, that you will be there in the morning. But he was already in the passage, putting on his cloak, and without one objection, one murmur, he departed. It was then 9 o'clock. He did not return till midnight. Starved and tired enough he was, but he looked happier than when he set out. He had performed an act of duty, made an exertion, felt his own strength to do and deny, and was on better terms with himself. I am afraid the whole of the ensuing week tried his patience. It was Christmas week. We took to no settled employment, but spent it in a sort of merry domestic dissipation. The air of the moors, the freedom of home, the dawn of prosperity, acted on Diana and Mary's spirits like some life-giving elixir. They were happy from morning till noon, from noon till night. They could always talk, and their discourse, witty, pithy, original, had such charms for me that I preferred listening to and sharing in it to doing anything else. St. John did not rebuke our vivacity, but he escaped from it. He was seldom in the house. His parish was large, the population scattered, and he found daily business in visiting the sick and poor in its different districts. One morning at breakfast, Diana, after looking a little pensive for some minutes, asked him if his plans were yet unchanged. Okay, one second, I'm double checking when the chapter ends. Oh, is this just the last chapter? Whoa. That's a lot of pages. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish this. Unchanged and unchangeable, was the reply, and he proceeded. Hello. Okay, there we go. Sorry, my microphone is kind of being glitchy lately. Um, People tend to just kind of lurk in my ASMR streams. It's fine. Like, I don't mind. I love my lurkers. I love the people that support me no matter what form they take it in. Generally, chat is a little bit more active on my streaming days when I'm doing just normal gaming stuff. So, like on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, chat will be a lot more active. Oh, it's okay. I think I'm gonna start saving up for a new one soon. See if there's a better one, maybe. One that has less of a delicate plug. Unchanged and unchangeable was the reply, and he proceeded to inform us that his departure from England was now definitively fixed for the ensuing year. And Rosamond Oliver, suggested Mary, the words seeming to escape her lips involuntarily. Um, For no sooner had she uttered them than she made a gesture as if wishing to recall them. St. John had a book in his hand. It was his unsocial custom to read at meals. He closed it and looked up. Rosamond Oliver, said he, is about to be married to Mr. Granby, one of the best connected and most estimable residents in S, grandson and heir to Sir Frederick Granby. I had the intelligence from her father yesterday. His sisters looked at each other and at me. We all three looked at him. He was serene as glass. The match must have been got up hastily, said Diana. They cannot have known each other long. But 2 months. They met in October at the country ball at S. But where there are no obstacles to a union, as in the present case, where the connection is in every point desirable, delays are unnecessary. They will be married as soon as S place, which Sir Frederick gives up to them. Can he refit it for their reception? The first time I found St. John alone after this communication, I felt tempted to inquire if the event distressed him. But he seemed so little to need sympathy that, so far from venturing to offer him more, I experienced some shame at the recollection of what I had already hazarded. Besides, I was out of practice in talking to him. His reserve was again frozen over, and my frankness was congealed beneath it. He had not kept his promise of treating me like his sisters. He continually made little chilling differences between us, which did not at all tend to the development of cordiality. In short, now that I was acknowledged his kinswoman, and lived under the same roof with him, I felt the distance between us to be far greater than when he had known me only as the village schoolmistress. When I remembered how far I had once been admitted to his confidence, I could hardly comprehend his present frigidity. Such being the case, I felt not a little surprised when he raised his head suddenly from the desk, over which he was stooping, and said, "You see, Jane, the battle is fought, and the victory is won." Startled at being thus addressed, I did not immediately reply. After a moment's hesitation, I answered, "But are you sure you are not in the position of those conquerors whose triumphs have cost them too dear? Would not such another ruin you?" "I think not. And if I were, it does not much signify. I shall never be called upon to contend for such another. The event of the conflict is decisive. My way is now clear. I think good for it." So saying, he returned to his papers and his silence. As our mutual happiness, i.e., Diana's, Mary's, and mine, settled into a quieter character, and we resumed our usual habits and regular studies, St. John stayed more at home. He sat with us in the same room, sometimes for hours together, while Mary drew. Diana pursued a course of encyclopedic reading she had, to my awe and amazement, undertaken, and I worked away at German. He pondered a mystic lore of his own, that of some Eastern tongue, the acquisition of which he thought necessary to his plans. I mean, that's fair. Probably should know the language if you're going to be a missionary out there. Thus engaged, he appeared sitting in his own recess, quiet and absorbed enough. But that blue eye of his had a habit of leaving the outlandish-looking grammar and wandering over and sometimes fixing upon us, his fellow students, with a curious intensity of observation. If caught, it would be instantly withdrawn. Yet ever and anon it returned searchingly to our table. I wondered what it meant. I wondered, too, at the punctual satisfaction he never failed to exhibit on an occasion that seemed to me of small moment, namely my weekly visit to Morton School, and still more was I puzzled when, if the day was unfavorable, if there was snow or rain or high wind, and his sisters urged me not to go, he would invariably make light of their solicitude, and encourage me to accomplish the task without regard to the elements. Jane is not such a weakling as you would make her, he would say. She can bear a mountain blast, or a shower, or a few flakes of snow, as well as any of us. Her constitution is both sound and elastic, better calculated to endure variations of climate than many more robust. And when I returned, sometimes a good deal tired, and not a little weather-beaten, I never dared complain, because I saw that to murmur would be to vex him, and on all occasions fortitude pleased him. The reverse was a special annoyance. Hi, goofball. This is Jane Eyre. We are just about to get to chapter 31. Well, not really just about. It's not really all that close. I actually am, like, just about to end stream, like, right now. I'm doing shorter ASMR streams lately because I have one, D&D, and two, because it does wear on my vocal cords just a little bit. I love reading. It's just also very tiring. But yeah, we're getting very close to the very end of it. I'm sorry, Sumi. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. Yeah. I hope you all enjoyed. I'm going to be streaming again on Thursday. And yeah. Thank you again so much, all of you, for the support and the affection and all of just the wonderful, wonderful being you. I hope you have a wonderful night. I hope you have a good day. I hope you have a good next few days. I'll see you later. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.